the perception of the chair depends on the institution. I came out of a model of the rotating chair. They hired me from being chair is important. Sometimes we think of, well, tag, you're it.
Yes, we do.
But it really has changed. And I will say that my philosophy as being chair is, how can I put people into positions to succeed? That's kind of that cheerleader. It should be more than just filling out schedules. And at UWF, it really has changed into an administrative position. I'm a faculty member who's chair. I'm not a chair who happens to be a faculty member. I think that's an important orientation.
You've just heard Dave Strohmetz from the University of West Florida. My podcast partner, Eric Landrum, had the opportunity to interview Dave as a part of a group of interviews that he conducted at STP's annual conference on teaching in Pittsburgh in fall 2022. Our thanks to Dave, our thanks to STP, and our thanks to you for listening to the Psych Sessions podcast. Now, please enjoy this episode. Macmillan Psychology's Achieve for Psychology is here to help you build academic integrity in the classroom, because it's not just about cheating, it's about increasing positive behaviors. Achieve helps you build academic integrity in the classroom through goal setting and reflection surveys. These frequent low-stakes assignments prepare students for exams and thus reduce course stresses that can lead to cheating. Achieve's goal setting and reflection surveys also help students set personal goals and provide instructors meaningful ways to check in with students and their goals. Again, helping students feel more comfortable in class and with study materials helps instructors keep academic dishonesty out of the classroom. Preview how Achieve helps build academic integrity in the classroom at macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions. You can make an impact with PsychLearn. PsychLearn from the American Psychological Association is a complete all-digital instructional resource for psychology courses. PsychLearn drives deeper engagement than traditional printed textbooks, immersing students in multi-dimensional learning experiences with engaging content for practice and formative assessment. Structured around applied cognitive science, PsychLearn helps students gain confidence in their understanding of foundational concepts and builds toward critical learning outcomes. Research methods, introduction to social psychology, and statistics for the behavioral sciences are now available on the PsychLearn platform, with more content to come. Please visit pl.apa.org/sessions to find out more. That's psychlearn.apa.org/sessions to find out more. The Psych Sessions podcast is sponsored by STP. That is the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. That's APA Division 2. You can find them at teachpsych.org. The views or product endorsements expressed do not represent the views, support, or endorsements of STP. Psych Sessions is so grateful to have STP as a long-term supporter.
I am here at ACT in Pittsburgh 2022, and I am with Dave Strohmetz from the University of West Florida. Hi, Dave.
How you doing, Eric?
Good. Thanks for asking. Thank you for being a guest on Psych Sessions.
My pleasure.
So I have all kinds of things to talk to you about. I don't know if you want to start with that we are both department chairs, or start with your 3-Dog Night textbook about research methods, the cover, or transitioning from Monmouth University to Florida. What's going on in your life these days?
What's going on in my life? There's so many different things. It's interesting. I'm at a point in my life where I'm start thinking about the back end of my career.
Yeah, me too.
What is the mark that I want to make? I've worked my way up through the academy. I'm now a chair. I'm actually a 2-time chair. I was a chair at Monmouth University, and I ended up moving to West Florida to be a chair because I was getting bored at my previous institution.
Now, are you being serious about that when you say that? You were getting bored?
I was getting bored. So when I was, I guess a little backstory would be helpful in my life. When I came out of graduate school, I could have went either way, applied sector or teaching. I ended up getting a job at a very small school. In Virginia, I literally doubled the department. They had 1 faculty member. I became number 2. And then my colleague left after a year. So I was senior member of a 2-person department, second year out of graduate school.
So where did you go to undergrad?
So I went to Dickinson College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
I went to Dickinson to be a lawyer. That was my intention. And Dickinson was right next to Dickinson School of Law. And I realized what they were going through, and I decided I didn't want to do that. So it left me a quandary, which I major in. And I decided that I might as well major in something I liked, because I figure if you have to spend 40% of your time in classes in a major, you might as well take classes you enjoy. So that literally, I'm using the word literally a lot now, is why I majored in psychology. It wasn't this incredible passion of science. It was really, I liked the courses. When I graduated college, I had no idea what I wanted to do.
So was there a lawyer in your family? What inspired that interest in law school?
So I'm from a lower working class background, and when you do well in school and you like to argue, people naturally think you should be a lawyer. I wasn't a doctor, I was a lawyer. So that was kind of the impetus. And I'm really first generation college student. So when I went to college, I really didn't know what I was doing. In many ways, I was fortunate enough, I'm going to phrase it this way. I was fortunate enough to be poor enough to go to the college I went to.
Okay.
And I mean that in terms of financial aid and things like this. I look back in terms of college costs. I'm not sure how I afforded it, but I was fortunate in terms of grants and things like this. So I went to college, and one of the things that I will say happened in college, I got involved doing student research. I had a faculty member, a social psychologist, asked me to help him with a study. I do not remember why he asked me. I wasn't the top student. I was a solid B student, but I got involved. And I bring this up because after I graduated college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I applied at the warehouse my father worked at, which was a paper company. It was, if you think of Dunder Mifflin, this was Garrett Buchanan Paper Company.
Okay.
I used to work in the warehouse there. Applied to be a salesperson there. I would have been the Jim Halpern of Garrett Buchanan Paper Company. But then I got a job as a research assistant in a large study on studying depression among the elderly in a geriatric center. Why? Because of that undergraduate research I did that led to a presentation at Eastern Psych Association. Doing research there is what led me to decide to apply to graduate school. And I went to Temple University. I had different opportunities, but I went to Temple because they guaranteed me funding for 4 years.
So don't you think that as an undergraduate, the professor who plucked you, if you will, saw talent, saw initiative? I mean, it wasn't a random choice. Come on. I mean, it's me and you talking, all right? We happen to be in front of microphones,
right.
But I mean, it wasn't randomness. It wasn't a required thing for him to pick you.
Yeah, and it's always hard to look back and say, what was it in me per se? I always feel fortunate. I feel like I've associated with great people, and I've really been on their coattails, and they've helped me provide me opportunities. And maybe this is one of them. I'm not sure why, but I'm always grateful for this for happening. I know I always feel like there's that lucky accident that I was in the right place, right time. And you've already mentioned about textbooks. We'll talk about this. The issue of becoming chair at West Florida. Simply, I think the mantra is, I've often said yes to things, or why not, as opposed to immediate no.
Right. But Dave, let's see, how do I say this politely to a guest that you've asked to do something? I don't think these are happy accidents. Don't you? Can I offer you a plausible alternative explanation?
You could, as a good psychologist.
Perhaps it was the hard work that you've done at every single stage of your career that led to someone offering you the research position, which you knocked out of the park and went to EPA, which, by the way, not every undergraduate student experience results in an EPA conference presentation. Or perhaps it was really hard work that landed a book contract. Or perhaps it was super hard and industrious work that landed the job at the University of West Florida department chair. I'm not so sure it was fortune or luck or being in the right place in the right time.
I accept that. I think that I've always tried to just do a little bit better. And I will say it's also associated with positive models.
Right.
I think that helps. That brings me along. Everyone, I'm sure, listening to podcasts familiar with the imposter phenomenon.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Psych Sessions is sponsored by W.W. Norton, who wants to give you a $25 gift card. So keep listening. You know what I want out of a textbook? I want to know that my students are taking responsibility for their own learning, but I also want that textbook to support the learning, making it really interesting. So it turns out that Norton Publishing has a solution. Have you ever seen the book Interactive Psychology for your intro course? It's a dynamic, digital, low-cost book, and it introduces students to psychological science through experiences. It really values active learning. Written by authors who have been doing this for a long time, like Psych 1 director Bridget Martin-Hard, this is a book your students will actually enjoy reading. There's lots of opportunity to do really interesting things, like participate in experiments and analyze data and explore cultural similarities and differences. And now you can hold your students accountable for engaging in these active learning features. Again, it's interactive psychology from Norton, and the folks at Norton would love to give you a demo and hear your feedback in exchange for a $25 gift card. Check it out at siegel.wwnorton.com/psych sessions. That's Siegel, like the bird, SEAGULL.wwnorton.com/psych sessions.
And I think I'm finally over that 30 plus years in my career. But I've always tried to learn from others. And I think maybe that's helped me along the way. But I do think that I've tried to be prepared for opportunities when they present them.
Yeah, so many people that I have the privilege of talking to express the same kind of thing that you do. Even Bill McKeechee, when I got to interview him late in life, would continue to say, I was just lucky. I would try to gently have a conversation with Bill McKeechee in his 90s and say, Bill, you weren't just lucky. You worked incredibly hard your entire career. No one accepted your publications, your journal submissions on the basis of luck or random chance. I think people take that tactic as a sign of humility, which I think we all understand. No one wants to brag about it, but you've achieved the things that you've achieved because you worked incredibly hard for them.
Well, I appreciate it. It's funny how we see ourselves. I look at Bill McKeechee. If you use a baseball analogy, he's the 400 hitter.
Right.
I see myself as that 285 guy,
yeah.
Solid and really doing great things. But then I associate with the 300, 325 hitters, and it's always your comparison group, I'm sure. And I'm happy with that. I see my goal is to support other people and make them better, as opposed to be the person who is the top of the field.
Well, I'm glad, I'll get off of this topic, okay. I promise, in about 15, 20 minutes. I think you're selling yourself short.
Well, thank you.
But you get to perceive yourself the way that you want to. I will respect that. And secondly, Bill McKeechee would love that you chose baseball as the analogy. I don't know if he did that on purpose, but he loved playing softball.
Yeah.
And he once said something to the effect of, the 31 no-hitters that I pitched are just as valuable to me as 31 publications I have on my CV. He loved playing softball in the faculty league. So,
well, it's funny you say that, because when I moved to Pensacola, I decided to join a senior softball league to get to know people. And what I realized is how poor of an athlete I am. But I worked hard to become better. and I left on top of my game, so to speak. But I worked hard, and I think there's something about sports as a good metaphor for always trying to be harder. Today, I read a quote by someone who talked about the value of sports is you're putting yourself out there to fail, and then you're really encountering your greatest fear, which is failure.
I don't think we do that as teachers as often as we should. I think we oftentimes go into the classroom and we teach the course the way we taught it the last time. I think there's safety in that there's comfort in that, and I think you've brought up a really good point that we don't often take those risks.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the biggest shifts I had in my teaching career is where I learned to take risks. Where I learned that it's kind of my classroom. If I can't be safe in the environment that I created myself, then shame on me. And I think that's valuable for students when you take risks. I'll give you an example of this in my social psychology class. Just finished talking about prejudice, and students all have their own perspectives, and I started with talking about my incredible blind spots, things that I've done in the past where made sexist comments without realizing it until someone pointed it out. And then it's like, my gosh, you're right. I've talked about my upbringing, and because I know the stories that I have resonate with students who will never speak about it. But if they see someone else that happens, that's good. Now, I will say I do take some literary license with this, but I think that's willing to take risks in classroom. And sometimes I've said some things that were not quite on point, and then someone points out to me, I go, and I admit, you're absolutely right, and I change.
I think that's a great rapport that an instructor can have with students. I was teaching capstone a couple semesters ago, and I was trying to make a joke about something, and I made a heteronormative joke in my classroom, and someone pointed out, that's not always the way it is with couples. And I stopped in my tracks and I said, you're right. I'm so sorry. I apologize. I wasn't thinking that through. And I think most instructors have to be in a place where they're comfortable saying, and I have enough experience and privilege, to be honest, where I could say to my classroom of 50, 60, 80 students, I apologize. I didn't think that through. And fortunately, my students were appreciative of that and could have been just as easily angry with me about that. But like you just said, you can model that. You can make a mistake. It's honest. You can apologize when you realize it. And my students were comfortable calling me out on it, which I genuinely appreciated.
I think you're also modeling that learning is transactional and it's a partnership. Yeah. I'm not sitting there. I'm not the sage on the stage.
Right. And I'm not perfect.
No.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. You were talking about sports a minute ago. I'm not on Facebook very often these days or social media, but I do know that you continue to be a diehard Eagles fan.
Go Birds.
There you go. You got it in. I believe, weren't you at an Eagles game recently?
So it's fine. I have two sons. Talk about very different sons. The older one is a musician. He is a high school band / choir / theater director. The younger one is the athlete. And so we've now, for the past 9-10 years, we've been going to Eagles games. And even though I've moved to Florida, trying to make a point of going to a game. So I flew up, and the reason, it's kind of funny, this particular game, because I decided let's go in early October when it'll be warm, I could wear shorts. And I went there, and it's when the remnants of Hurricane Ian had hit, and it was pouring rain, and had a great time. And it turned out it was part of my birthday present for my son, because he arranged, we went to a pregame with former NFL stars. They did, so it was a lot of fun. But yeah, so I enjoy the NFL sports, which has been a big change being in Florida, where everyone's like, "Go Gators, roll Tide."
Right.
I'm an NFL guy.
Well, and so in Idaho, there are no NFL teams, so we follow the Boise State Broncos with the blue turf. The Smurf turf is big for us. But I've been a Chicago Bears fan my whole life. I grew up halfway between Chicago and Milwaukee. So who did you meet at the NFL event?
Well, it was Chris Long Foundation.
Oh, okay, sure.
And this is one of the great things about, people talk about athletes and they might in dismissive terms, but the things that people have done, he has a foundation that really, earlier we were talking ACT about human rights, and for him is clean drinking water is a human rights. And so it was a special fundraiser for that, but it was Chris Long and oh my gosh, forgetting some of the
That's
people
okay.
there.
No worries.
But all I know is I felt very small.
Oh, yeah,
that's the way I felt.
Even the retired NFL players are still pretty big.
There's one person that he lost like 60 pounds. I didn't recognize him. So he's down to felt 285, But it was just really, and my son is taller than me too, so it felt very small.
And you're pretty tall.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm average. So,
all right.
But anyway, yeah, it was fun. And I do those things because one of the things I think is important is memorable moments, experiences. And I will say this with my children, we've been all over the country in our pop-up trailer, and the impact we've had on our sons doing these trips is memorable, even though, we could have went to Disney and things like this, but we did what we could afford and it didn't matter, and it's made a difference. And you'll probably get this kind of my philosophy of teaching, so I'm going to just slide into that if you'll not.
Go for it.
Because when I read a book one time, it was by Simon Sinek, and the book is called Start With Why, W-H-Y. And it was a business book talking about where do corporations lose their way. They know what they do, they know how they do it, they don't know why they do it. And I've kind of taken that approach to my teaching and even parenting without even realizing it. I sat down and started thinking about what is my why, and I've decided it's to provide meaningful educational experiences. And that really informs a lot of things. So when we took our kids across country and doing these things, it was really meaningful to them. Going out, we grew up in New Jersey, but when you travel to Wyoming, you understand the gun culture. You understand it's a tool you use.
Right.
You go to rodeos, you understand how people think differently. Go to Texas. I've not been to Idaho, only Idaho just a little bit, crossing from Yellowstone.
Sure.
But I think that makes a difference in their lives. And when I do things in the classroom, I also try to think about meaningful educational experiences. Why do I take large groups of students to regional conferences on my quote-unquote own time?
Right.
Because you know what? It means a lot to them because someone did it for me back when I was a student. So going to like these football games with my son, when you see them once a year, it becomes a meaningful thing we do.
Yeah, it's very thoughtful. It's very much pay it forward. Yeah. You really can't pay it back, but you can pay it forward with your current University of West Florida students. Yeah. And I'm just trying to process through those family vacations in that pop-up camper. The joke I've always made my entire life is that I don't care for camping. I've done it once or twice. Camping for me was a Holiday Inn with a broken TV, right? That's about as much as I want to rough it. I would glamp, I think. Yes. I don't think I would camp. But, I think if, as a kid, I might not have appreciated it, but if I had parents who, years later, if it was explained to me like you have, is that it had been thought out, that we weren't just going on this trip, but this trip had meaning and had been planned, and we were going somewhere because there were layers to it. We weren't just going to see Grandma and Grandpa, but we were going to make certain stops along the way that were planful and meaningful and had depth to them. That's pretty special. I got to tell you, just listening to you.
Well, let me put one caveat to we weren't roughing it. I mean, our pop-up had an air conditioner, just so you know.
Okay.
So it was doing this. But you know what? I also had the mantra of you need quantity time to have quality moments.
Yeah.
And so there's some stories in Strohmetz folklore about dad and certain things there's one story where my favorite saying to my sons was, this is just like Disney, except the real thing. And there was one time we were on this floating river that was barely moving in this big raft. And I said, this is just like Disney, except the real thing. And my son had a cup of water in his hand, and he just immediately threw it at me. Now, as time stood still...
Splash Mountain.
Exactly. But time stood still, and he was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? How will Dad react? Will he, erupt or laugh? And I laughed. But it was one of those moments that will forever be in Strohmetz folklore. I think that's important, meaningful moments. And I think we do the same thing in the classroom, where you have a student ask a question, and all of a sudden you think about something, and there's an aha moment. And I'll give you an example of this, if you don't mind. I was talking about microaggressions in social psychology class. And I was talking about the issue, some people say, what's wrong with just not seeing color? You often hear this, microinvalidation. I don't see color, I see human. And all of a sudden I stopped and I said, have you ever heard a person of color say that phrase? And that's one of those epiphany moments. Mm-hmm. And I share it all the time. It's but it's part of that quantity time of interacting with students, not talking at them, that I think makes a difference.
Yeah, I like your idea of time. I say to people who will listen, the greatest gift I have to give is the gift of time. I'm fortunate enough and privileged enough in my life. If I want to make more money, I have ways of making more money. I have no ways of making more time. And so when I give time to people, to colleagues, to community events, to volunteer, to my family, that's the greatest gift I have to give.
Well, and I will say, Eric, I'm going to compliment you. This whole psych session is what you and Garth does. It really is, you're spending time. You could be interacting with colleagues now, owning your craft. Well, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
But you're creating something in perpetuity, hopefully. You're creating something that, you've created access to incredible people in the field.
Thank you for admitting that. No.
Beyond myself,
I almost got it in there. No, I'm going to, guess what? I get to edit too.
But, the fact is that, and I'm very appreciative, when I started in a small school in Virginia, brand new teacher, I was teaching 6 classes a semester, and I taught every class except developmental psychology. That value, meeting people made a difference. I remember my first teaching conference was at James Madison University, and Doug Bernstein was there, and he gave demonstrations. It's so funny, demonstrations we could never use today. One was problem solving, play this record. He had a vinyl record. And it was the idea, he gave you things like piece of paper, tape, a needle, and things like this. Things that would not resonate well with technology. But I think that you're spending your time now to really make a difference on the field. So,
well, thank you.
And for the record right now, Eric is turning red.
I've just normally read all the time. Yeah. When I started, the supplements for textbooks would come in overhead transparencies. They weren't coming in PowerPoint slides. Yep. PowerPoint wasn't invented yet.
We're the same cohort. In fact, one of the things I loved about PowerPoint is all my overhead transparencies after class would be a big mess, and then you have to reorganize them again.
Well, and my hands would be black because I'd used them as an eraser on the PowerPoint slides I had written on on top of the overhead projector. Yeah. And we if you want to keep going down that old age road.
No, we don't need
punch cards with SPSS decks. Over at the computer center in graduate school and all that. So I know you have dear friends at Monmouth University, and some that you have collaborated with over the years, and you still collaborate with.
Yep.
And someone told me that every time you have a new edition of your research methods textbook, you add a dog to the cover. Yeah. Is that accurate information?
It's a puppy.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Well, it's funny when we first, and I will say that my colleagues are huge dog people. Not a huge pet person. We've had cat. But they wanted to have puppies. And one of the reasons is to make the textbook cover memorable, because publishers love having abstract pictures on covers. And we wanted something memorable so that people remember the puppy book. I will say, you have Methods book, the one with the puppies, remember. But there's also a little Easter egg in there, because if you're familiar with the puppy, it's on there. Do you remember what type of puppy it is?
No, I haven't seen the newest version.
They're all the same. It's a Labrador or a lab puppy or a lab for a lab book.
Oh, look at you. So tell our listeners, if you don't mind, about the book and about your co-authors.
So my co-authors, I like to say I'm Al, because it's Lewandowski, Sirocco, and Strohmetz, or Lewandowski and Al. The book, I will say, was a brainchild of Gary Lewandowski. And we've taught methods at Monmouth University in New Jersey, not Illinois.
Monmouth College in Illinois would get confused all the time.
Yes. We're named after the county, not the town. You're named after the town, if I believe.
Yes, we are. Yeah, Monmouth College is in Monmouth, Illinois.
Right, and Monmouth University is in Monmouth County,
and the only reason that's relevant to me is I was an undergraduate and graduated from Monmouth College in Monmouth, Illinois.
Right.
Yeah.
So we taught methods, and our goal is to make research methods engaging, and we've done a lot of different activity ways, but Gary started thinking about the idea of, we seem to teach methods in a way that does not reflect the actual research process, where you start with an idea and you learn what other people have done and you explore it, and then you actually collect the data and you present the data in some way, shape, or form. And he also started thinking about, students really engage in material they find interesting, and students have lots of questions. It is rare not to find at least 2 out of every 5 psych majors who want to know what goes on in the mind of a serial killer. And many want to become profilers. And I will say, thank goodness we don't need many profilers out there. It's not a thriving industry. Thank you.
The story that we had a person who just retired from our department who did some stuff with the FBI and had some contacts there and had the information to be able to say this: take the number of profilers on Criminal Minds, double it. That's the number of profilers in the FBI in the United States. So every student who comes to us, we gently try to burst that bubble so they know what they're really asking about.
But they find the questions fascinating.
They do indeed.
And so we start thinking about, how can we construct a textbook that it's based around not concepts per se, but interesting questions, and you learn the concepts along the way. So our book is really structured around almost a case study approach, where every chapter we start with a question that might be relevant to them. It might be on attraction, relationships. Should you join a sorority or fraternity? Things like this. But we tied into some other concept, like how could your decision to join a Greek organization be related to your sense of self and your self-concept clarity? And then we take this idea and we say, what is the literature found? And then how can we use a method to study and answer this question? Let me give you a different example. So the use of cell phones in classrooms is really controversial, because students are like, why not? Students, and I know faculty who are adamant, they shame you if it goes off. And if you're familiar with Dan Wegner's white bear study, told not to think of a white bear, and then you're naturally thinking of it. So we decided to use this idea as an interesting way where research questions come from. And we asked the question, could banning cell phones in class actually make it more disruptive to learning? And we designed a 2-group study based on, and so you're going through the decision process of it. And we give students fake data. We didn't really do it, of course, and it ends with it. The whole goal of the book is for you to start thinking about how can I approach questions as a researcher and go through all the processes, knowing that most students will never actually get the opportunity to conduct their own study. So that's where it's come from. And I will say that this, again, fortunate enough to have great colleagues who said, hey, Dave, are you interested? Why not? And I was part of it. And what we've done, going back to your question of the puppies, what we've tried to do now is to every cover, every edition has another puppy. So we've added a third puppy on it. And I will point out the third puppy. One of the things we've tried to do is real diversity in the color. So the first one was a white lab, and we've now diversified it because that's important issues.
Right. And let me just add for the listeners, if you're not familiar with books or textbook publishing, to get a book to the third edition is a real accomplishment. So it's always an accomplishment to get a contract and to write it and to publish it. But to be able to revise it means it's a successful book. Publishers will not keep investing in revisions unless it's selling and unless it's meeting the need in the market. So again, to you and to Natalie and to Gary, congratulations on that. That is a big accomplishment.
Our publisher said, we have a real book now.
They didn't say that after the second edition?
Well, but the third, as you just point out, it's staying power. The other thing I will say, we were just talking about the imposter phenomenon. It's funny, we always thought about textbook authors have to be brilliant and the top of the game. One of the things we've learned is publishers love people who get the work done on time.
Right.
And they're dependable, and they're also listening to good feedback. When you're publishing, you're always the dreaded reviewer number 2. Mm-hmm. In textbook, it's reviewer 2, 14, 35, and 61.
Right. But also, they can also be brilliant and on top of their game.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There could be. That's also author 1, author 2, and author 3.
Yes.
Thank you. Oh. So, is the work that the three of you have done on employable skills connected to research methods, or is that a separate project?
That's a separate project. That was Natalie and I have really picked up on that.
Gary.
Not Gary.
Gary slacked off on that one.
Gary's doing incredible things. He's the guru of relationships, really spreading word.
Okay.
So Natalie and I, one of those questions, I'm not sure how it arose, but he talked about creating a scale to measure self-efficacy, employable skills. And remember I talked about how a research conference led to my first job, which led to graduate school? This project is what led me to be in Pensacola, Florida now. We decided to create a scale that measures, students' perceived self-efficacy, like how confident are you on these different skills? And we took Drew Appleby's skills and we developed items with this. And we did get some funding through APS and I think STP for developing the scale. And it's called ESSIS, Employable Skills Self-Efficacy Scale. We've actually, you can go online and take the scale yourself at employableskills.com. And what we've tried to do, it's a self-assessment, so students can measure assess where they're at, and then we compare it to how other students feel, or where you are in norms. And then we give recommendations. If you feel a little weaker in this area, what are things that you could do? And we've been doing some research based on this. One of the studies that we're in the process of writing up is what skills are you developing class? Like what type of class assignments lead to greater improvement in self-efficacy? For example, collaborative work. Is there a connection between the more group projects I do? Does that actually help students start feeling more confident in their skills? And so that's what we're looking at. I bring the connection to West Florida because Natalie and I presented that research at an ACT conference in San Antonio. And then Jane Halonen came up to me and
everybody drink.
Everyone, no, $1. You get that. And Jane, this was for you. She asked me after that presentation, she said 2 things. 1, that was great. 2, are you pluckable? And she had meant, are you in a stage in your career where you're willing to do something different? And and I said, maybe, let's talk. And here I am in West Florida.
So a couple things before we go to West Florida. First off, I really appreciate the focus on skills because that's something I'm passionate about as well. Secondly, I've used your scale, your anatomy scale, in some of my own work. Pre-COVID, I was starting to use it with asking sophomores to fill it out and asking them to fill it out again as seniors to look at it. Could we show their self-efficacy, self-report over time improved? Because hopefully, as they're taking more psych courses, they feel an increase in their self-reported skills over time. COVID kind of threw a monkey wrench into that, but I'd like to get back to that because it's a really well-designed, well-executed scale. So thank you for that contribution to the literature. It's great that it's out there publicly, and I think it's also on the STP website under instructional resources as well.
I think that's where it originally started.
Right, yeah.
And one of the things, a listener might think, well, isn't what important is what their actual skills are? And our approach or thinking about this is, you may have skills, but if you don't know you have skills or confident, you're not going to sell yourself on those skills. So there has to be a confidence level. When you go in an interview and the employer says, well, tell me about your speaking skills, and you have to have some self-efficacy.
This is a really good point because I think anytime we go into an area in psychology, we almost always start with self-report. It's a really natural place to go. And anyone who criticizes your work on, well, why don't you just measure the skills? We don't do that a lot with student skills. We measure writing skills because that's the one that's pluckable there. But how many people are really measuring critical thinking skills at graduation or ethical reasoning or decision making? We talk that talk, but not many departments, including my own, walk that walk. So anyone who's being critical about, well, you're only measuring self-attribution or self-efficacy, well, at least you're measuring something in a systematic basis based on a measure that was psychometrically determined. Don't be hypercritical of that unless you're really measuring skills like with an assessment center or some other way. I don't care for people who are hypercritical but don't have a better alternative.
Right, and I guess my point is, you may have the skills, but if you don't confident you have them, you're not going to sell them.
Right.
You're not going to pursue I'm a little bit more, I don't feel like I have these skills, I can get better at this. What I've tried to become a better teacher is because I realize the skills I have deficits in. I've tried to get better on these things.
Well, yeah, we see this also in students all the time where they don't realize what they can do. And so I think that's where what the value of the scale that you guys have developed, what you're pointing out. I've overheard conversations with students who will say, well, I wasn't a research assistant. I don't have research skills to put on my resume or my CV. And I'll go, and I will overhear and then interject probably rudely and say, didn't you have a research methods class? And didn't you do a project in that class where you collect data, wrote it up, put it in APA format, analyzed it in SPSS, and wrote a complete manuscript? And they go, oh yeah, I did do that. Guess what? You have some research skills. You didn't have to be a research assistant to get experience in research. Didn't you have that psych measurement course where you did that class project where you actually collaborated on a research project for the university? So sometimes students don't recognize their own skills or that class projects, class group work actually led them to develop the skills on that very survey.
And in fact, I think as instructors, it's incumbent upon us to help point that out to us. Many times you'll have students to do some major capstone project, a semester-long project, and at the end they go, I wrote a paper, I did a thesis. And we talk with students and we say, how can you sell this on a job interview? They may not necessarily be concerned with, I've done a research paper, but if you said, let me tell you a project that required project management skills, that I had to organize and plan out over a period of time, that I had to engage in self-regulation, self-management, because I set myself time markers to get things done. At the end, I had to present it to a large group of people. All of a sudden, that final project becomes more meaningful to employers. And it's funny, we're talking about skills, and I will point out, Eric, I don't know if you remember, but when you were ACT president or STP president, you had Task Force on Skills, and I was on that.
You were?
Yeah, and I think that's might have been when we first really started interacting, because I went up to you and said, let me help. Again, putting yourself out there. But that was all part of skills, and I think that is an important improvement and change in the field since when I started teaching. It was like, let's look at what skills, because psychology is, science, it's always evolving, and same thing with people's education. It's not just learning this content, but it's the skills you're developing as you're learning the content. I think in those terms.
The content is available on these cell phones that we have. The content's available. You can Google the content. It's our students' ability, and as professionals, it's our ability to be able to understand what to do with the content, the practical application of it. So what greater compliment could someone get than for someone to come up to them and say, are you pluckable? I cannot imagine a higher compliment, much less, I can imagine, from Jane S.
Ding.
Halonen, drink. I mean, there you go. And there it is.
And from my perspective, again, I talked about associating great others. That's like, wow. I talk about the right place, right time. I will say, though, that opportunities you can take advantage of have to happen at the right place, right time. I just happen to be in where I was in my life with family issues, and even career-wise. I mentioned to you I was getting bored.
Yeah, but even if you said no, it's still a great compliment.
Yeah.
It's still a fantastic compliment. Ding.
Yeah. And let me add one other thing then. I think if you remember what my answer to her was maybe. It wasn't immediately dismissive, because you never know what may present itself. And I think that's important for us to help our students. I know students will immediately dismiss like a potential job opportunity. Well, I can't do that. Well, let's talk about it may be the best thing for you. Or taking a class, would you be interested in this class? No. Well, why not? You might be, and thinking about along those lines.
Right. So you'd been chair at Monmouth University, and you were hired into chair University of West Florida. Yes. I'm assuming you were hired with tenure.
Yes.
So you wanted that assurance. Were you hired as a department chair or department head?
They call it department chair.
Okay, but you were... But if at some point you don't want to be chair anymore, you would just become a regular member of the department.
Correct.
Full professor.
I came in with full professor with tenure. There was, be honest with you, I would not have moved.
I'm sorry, say again?
I would not have moved or changed locations without that.
Sure.
I'm department chair. Is the interesting thing, the perception of the chair depends on the institution. I came out of a model of the rotating chair. They hired me from being chair is important. Sometimes we think of, well, tag, you're it.
Yes, we do.
But it really has changed. And I will say that my philosophy as being chair is, how can I put people into positions to succeed? That's kind of that cheerleader. It should be more than just filling out schedules. And at UWF, it really is changed into an administrative position. So yes, I have terms, but not according to the dean. You're always serving a pleasure dean. But I will say one of the things, my identity is I'm a faculty member who's chair. I'm not a chair who happens to be a faculty member. I think that's an important orientation.
Yes.
I had thought about moving up in administration world, and I dabbled in that, and I decided I like what I do, because if you think about where I spend most of my time, it's prepping class. That's a highlight of my day. In fact, I will talk to students when I go into class, I will say, this is the highlight of my day. I will tell them I'm excited to be there. 9:30 in the morning, they're not excited, but I am. But I think knowing that I'm a faculty member who's chair, I'm willing to try to say, this is what I believe to be true, and I'm willing to take risks, not necessarily toe the line in a positive way. I'm being derogatory. But if the dean decides that our worldviews don't fit, put me back in the classroom. Love it. And I find that liberating, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
So I think it's important, but I also think that my role as chair is also to model good faculty behavior. So I still trying to publish because it's hard for me to encourage other people to do things that I would not necessarily do myself.
Right. And I obviously I can see that in you. How many faculty members? How many full-time and part-time?
We have 12, including myself, full-time faculty. Part-time, it's maybe 10. It varies, and we've shrunk in size. It's always a challenge. And, and one of my roles, I think, also as chair is helping the department see changing landscape of higher education. That's because many times things are changing and a faculty member doesn't need to know what's happening.
That's right.
That's my role.
Budget model based on student credit hours or historical budgeting, or
just historical. You get what
year over year.
You just get what you got in the past. Okay. So it's the currency of value now is majors. Number of majors. And now for graduate students, many institutions, they're struggling with tuition dollars, and the opportunities for revenue growth is not at the undergraduate level, particularly when you take into things like tuition discount, which is the effect of, the myth of the cost of a credit hour is not really what you bring in. Right. So it's really focused on graduate side, and that's one of the challenges is how do you meaningfully grow graduate programs to serve workforce needs.
And do you have a graduate program?
We have two. We have one in industrial organizational psychology and one in counseling program.
Master's or PhD?
Masters.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you, are there faculty, I shouldn't say splits, but are there graduate faculty and undergraduate faculty, or everyone contributes to both programs?
We have graduate faculty dedicated to counseling as well as IO, and then they all teach at the undergraduate level. One of the challenges, I think, in departments when you have graduate and undergraduate is this: you're creating these sub-tribes within the department, whereas we're there to contribute to the education of all. And sometimes people focus on their particular area, and that's a challenge. Yeah. I know when I was recruited, I came out of a department that did not have graduate programs. That's where we were at. So do I value the undergraduate experience? Yes, because I think that it impacts more people. But do I value graduate? Yes, because that helps people in their career goals.
Sure.
So notice how I'm walking the line there.
No.
But I think it's important.
You're a department chair, and so am I. So I get it. Yeah.
And we really, our goal is really to improve people's lives through education, help them achieve their goals. Some, as I know, Eric, you talk about the workforce psychology major. That for many people, this is what their end goal is. Yep. And their end goal may not be to become a psychologist, but their end goal is to have a meaningful career, if not calling, that allows them to draw upon their psychological background.
That's right.
And I think that's key. Whether someone goes on to field like counseling or IO psychology, that's great for them.
So, Dave, we've got a couple more minutes left. I'm going to switch gears on you a little bit. Growing up, was the question in your household, will you go to college, or what college will you go to?
It was always, what college will you go to?
Okay. Even though you're a first-generation student.
I think it's, I think because I did well in school, it was always an assumption. But I want to talk about that first-gen issue, because I think that is so pivotal. I think about the advantages my two sons have had in college because I was a college graduate. I always appreciate, think about things like my two sons, they both went to small liberal arts colleges. And they struggle with certain things, classes. And I remember telling them, it's okay to fail. Here's a saying, fail fast, move on. And I said, this is what you want to do. Get out of this course, withdraw, and you'll succeed. Whereas when I was in college, I didn't have that parental guidance per se. And a lot of times you get you're failing, you need to try harder. It was just not the right time, the right fit. And, I always think about how my sons, the advantages they've had, like I've never pressured them, like what job you're going to get. I was always more like, I know you'll be successful because of what you've done in college and those skills will carry over. So growing up, it was always just go into college, and choosing colleges were so different. I remember I chose my college. I didn't even visit the college. I had all the catalogs out and all the brochures. Went to the open house and I said, I want to go there. I'm not sure why. And I did early admission, things like this. Got me in.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
I have a sister, younger sister and younger brother. My sister went to college. She went to Westminster College, and she's in education now. She teaches kindergarten. And my brother actually went into the Navy, and he's in corrections system. So he did go to college after the Navy, but it was very different.
I talk to people. I talk to our students about the military all the time because I think you can get great education and great training in the military. And actually, I come from a Navy family. My father was in the Navy. My two brothers were in the Navy. And I actually thought about it. I actually applied to the Naval Academy when I was in high school. And I think it's a great option for a lot of people. And I also believe that college is not for everyone. And so I think the Navy or the military can be an awesome option.
Well, we were a Navy family too. My father's Navy grandfather. But I felt like when I graduated, the view of military is very different. If it was a post-Vietnam era, and it was never really thought about. For my brother, it was like he was one struggle through high school, and that became his option.
Yeah. I was of the age, and I think you are too. I filled out it wasn't a draft card. It was a selective service. I turned 18.
Yeah, we were one of the first ones to have to do that when it started.
1981.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Same cohort.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Dave, I'm just about out of time. Is there anything that you wanted to mention or thought, oh my gosh, I want him to ask, and I haven't asked?
So I thank you for talking with me.
Well, actually, I thank you for talking with me.
I think at the end of the day, how can we make a difference? And I think to be honest with you, I went back to that why. That's something I discovered later in life, having a kind of your own motto, creed. And I think that's important. Why are we doing this? Because people often focus on the monetary rewards and things like this. And it's just opportunity to meet people, make a difference. And I think we all need to find a way of making difference. For me, it's through education.
Right.
And I will say, like, hang around these great people makes me want to be a better person. So thank you, Eric. You're making me want to be a better person.
Thank you. First off, thank you for the compliment. I do remember. And
thank you, Jane Halonen.
I'm sorry, Jane who?
Jane Halonen.
Oh, thank you. Oh, drink. Bing. I do remember earlier in my career going to conferences, A, being exhausted, which sometimes I still am after a conference day, but B, being overwhelmed because I would see all these fantastic people and all these big names I've been reading about in journal articles, and then going back to my university going, oh my God, I'm never going to be like them, and just being overwhelmed. And I think with age, even now I can come and listen to amazing speakers and go, I don't have to be like them. I can be inspired by them. I can take their ideas and try to implement the ones that work for me. And I think it took me a while to realize I don't have to be like the people I see at conferences. I can't be like the people I see at conferences, but I can't take away the best of what I hear.
And you still be humbled by the amazing things that people do.
I'm humbled all the time. I'm humbled all the time by the energy and the intellect and the generosity of contributions that I see at every conference I go to. Linda Wolf gave a presidential address this morning, and if I had asked her a question, I would have asked her, okay, so the U.S. sucks. Is there anything positive going on? But it was good to see the data that she presented. It's good to be reminded of that. I'm not an expert in that. So,
well, speaking of that talk, got me thinking about how do you approach these topics in classes where you're encouraging people to actually listen. Being a social psychologist, I kept thinking belief perseverance, which we're seeing that in politics now. Yeah. And I think, how can I be a better person, being more aware, attuned to things? And that's why I appreciate Linda's talk. And I also appreciate interacting with students in class because they'll help point out your blind spots so I can become better. And the question is, how can we also help our students become better?
And that's the hard part of opening up our students' minds to consider new ideas while not being accused by the general public or parents of telling them what to think.
Right.
This is the tightrope that we sometimes walk in higher education.
Well, if we do it right, they should come to what they believe is the correct way of thinking. I'm not saying this quite right, but really it's different from indoctrination.
Right.
And education. And if we believe that this is, social justice is important, we should help them come to that same realization, same way we have.
Right. And just have the tools to be able to think about. And some of them already have those tools, but some of them clearly don't, or they're in development. And hopefully they get a chance to develop them further in our classrooms. Anything else, Dave? I don't want to forget anything. Any other books in the offering in the coming, or anything else?
No, not. I'm just trying to do my best, man.
And you're doing it.
I think there's value in if people around. I believe in the rising tide raises all ships. So if I help people do better, then I'll make a difference the way I can.
Diehard Philly guy, aren't you?
EAGLES, birds.
Go Bears.
All I can say is I'm sorry for the Bears. But anyway, I'm glad. I will say this, at least you're not a Cowboys fan, as a good Eagles fan would say, and that is for you, Gary Lewandowski.
We're going to end on that note. Thank you so much, Dave.
Thank you, Eric.